Alright folks, Worlds has officially started and we get our first glimpse as to potentially what the Worlds meta will be like, and the play-in stage is a really good opportunity for us to get a good calibration as to what's being prioritized in draft and get a good establishment of what the meta is basically going on. There's been a lot of back and forth going on across the scenes, and as well, Riot dropped a nuke of a patch with 14.18, just ensuring that the meta was healthy in a good game state for the World's meta, since it was pretty bad right beforehand. It was 80 carries everywhere, full clear junglers, and all the not. They decided to nuke everything and try to force a more balanced meta, one where there's a lot of different styles available. So in terms of both tempo, matchups, styles of champions that are available in honestly almost every role, and you're kind of seeing that in this case here. Do not be alarmed too much at the meta between the play-in stage and the main stage, because it will change, and it does change very often, because teams will find out on stage games that champions that were good in the play-in stage are no longer good, or certain other things become really hard to deal with as you go up and you face better and better teams. So while we get a glimpse of it here, we're probably going to see the meta define a little more strongly as we get closer to the S tier teams playing and whatnot. However, I can say for sure that some champions are going to be really heavily prioritized, and we can see some sort of dynamics in certain roles. So one of these picks is actually, I'd like to bring your attention, is the Poppy pick. One thing to flag with Poppy is that as a result of kind of the field changing around her, she has gotten extremely strong in more than one role as well. So she's actually a triple threat flex pick in terms of top, jungle, and support. And what causes, and I think this is my take on this champion being the one champion to probably have one of the highest presences in the entirety of the event, because of the fact that it itself can not only deny most of the champions in the meta, but also basically establish a win con for itself. Ironically, Vikings doesn't actually cash it out as well as I would have liked to see here, but that is one example of a champion that is going to be able to warp and force a lot of different styles. So Mad Lions Koi, they end up opening with an Italy here, B1. This is probably just stylistically what they think is best. For context, most of the best junglers now are probably the classic jungling style. So we're going to see a lot of J4, a lot of Lee Sin, a lot of Xin Zhao, potentially even Viego as well. People are going to figure out some of their styles, and there's a lot of options both for forwards and backwards, faster clearing versus slower clearing junglers, and in this case MDK value the B1 Italy the most. Both teams are drafting also relatively safely here, and they're relatively responsive in overall. So I would say it's more of a matter of who has the better read on what is better on this World's patch. So example, B1 Italy doesn't really reveal much other than the tempo of the game pace with regards to jungle. Orianna Poppy basically tells you nothing about the comp other than the Poppy being able to go backwards, and both teams are basically responding in kind. Jinx basically makes the most out of this front to back sort of situation, as well as Cassante, and then Ezreal basically aims to outrange it. One thing I'd like to flag as well with Poppy pick is that it opens up the Lee Sin pick, because now the Lee Sin pick can't really be countered as much. It does lose to a lot of the remaining field, I would say though, but it is as a feeler opener, and having to pick jungle on 4, it's not that bad. I'm sure there's a lot of things that you could slot here. I could see things like the Xin Zhao working, the Viego working as well, even Sejuani working. It's just a matter of what teams think is good in this patch, and taking the time to figure that out. And you can see it's pretty bog standard, but the main thing here is that when you see all 5 champions placed together, and although Vikings try to make use of good counter picks where they can, and their drafting fundamentals are in fact there, right? They have a good quote unquote poke comp, and they technically got counter pick in as many slots as possible while blinding and hedging against everything else. But when you compare the champions slot for slot, it kind of just looks like Mad Lions champions do more, if that makes sense, right? It's a bit of a stat check. So even in spite of getting a Camille into Cassante R5, being able to get the Ezreal into Jinx, it's it seems to not be enough here, because if you look at their comp, it just looks like it doesn't really do any damage, even though there's a lot of damage champions. You can compare it to the huge AoE of this K'Sante Jinx comp, and I would say the relative inability of Vikings to actually up the game pace in order to counter it. You can kind of see that the differences in meta and the differences in perception in meta actually affects what the outcome of the draft is. And I think in this case, it's kind of funny because both teams got what they wanted, but Mad Lions were the ones that came out on top. And you can kind of see, I can give it a couple of examples here, like where the game pace is just relatively slow, just because like all of these champions can't really do too much, right? The only way Vikings can really force something in terms of upping the game pace is like through the Lee Sin and Kimio combo, but they don't really have enough in order to force things on top of the map, right? And as a result, it's just kind of like a ticking time bomb where MDK just end up being able to chill out, as long as they don't bleed out completely. You know, they're 1,000 gold on their team is worth way more than 1,000 gold on Vikings, so it's just going to be a matter of playing the fundamentals right and then being able to just cash in from there. And it's just really easy for them to play out. It's a basic comp, but it does it really well. Game 2, a bit of a similar story here. Mad Lions, they just straight up go for the Jinx B1. I think this is going to be a prominent pick for the play-in stage, at least. As we get higher and higher into the stages, I actually do believe there's possibilities of other champions being viable. There's a lot of good stuff that's actually pretty good right now. A lot of people are picking up the Jhin, but since it's been out of comp for a while and we're in a meta where there's a decent amount of tanks, people have to exercise a decent amount of caution when picking this pick, because when you pick it early on 2 like this, it's not like a true blind in that sense, because you can blind it in terms of the matchup, but in terms of composition, Jhin has decent weaknesses in terms of his ability to deal enough damage in order to melt through entire front lines. Whereas, you're incentivizing Mad Lions to just pick a ton of front line. And if you're Vikings, you could probably think a step ahead of this and get ready to pick things that discourage picking tanks in areas like top lane. You could even go for like a pre-pick of certain champions in this case. But overall, I would say, I would explore potentially other AD carry options as well. So I think champions like the Lucian Nami are both very strong right now, as well as some of the Kaisa combos, if people are willing to do so. There's a lot of experimentation that still needs to be done as well. And it's a very adaptable meta is the main thing that I'd like to flag. It's, you can play front to back, you can play forward, you can play poke, like, it feels like Riot knows what's the healthiest meta in order to generate a healthy sort of Worlds experience, and they have basically dropped that right on top of the shitty meta that they had before and made sure that it was actually a good case here. So game 2, you can say the Vikings draft is a little bit better, but a little bit safe yet again, right? Every champ on the Vikings team is like technically blindable, and they're not going for enough of an advantage, and they're not creative enough in terms of their drafting in order to really counter what Mad Lions are bringing to the table. Like, they have more oomph in this case, but it's not like Mad Lions don't have a lot of power on their side to really answer what Vikings has to bring to the table. If the issue last time was the inability for Vikings to do anything, this time they can do things, but they don't have a cash out because of the fact that their comp is so like safe, right? You could all 5 of these champs in a world are technically blindable. And if these were the best 5 champions in the game, like, these are all Z tier champions, right? But obviously there has to be that sort of balance between being able to have a riskier pick, but it has a higher payout when it does find a team composition that it plays well into. So again, it's just really hard for it's really easy for Mad Lions to really minimize the aggressive pressure that Vikings bring to the table, and then they can just scale into their sort of late game strides. I do like the adaptation from Vikings though, but there are a couple of sort of, I didn't really like their Jhin on R2, as well as the Renekton answer into the K'Sante in order to, it's just kind of like a missed opportunity in that sense. So in both cases, you can kind of see, like, overall, I think Mad Lions at this stage have like a firmer grasp on what they think is strong in this meta, and they're just basically gonna ride with it, and it clearly shows why. If you look at the way their champions flow, it just seems like they have so much more that they can bring to the table in both their comps. Their champs just have like more options overall. It's not bad drafting by Vikings by any means, but there are some key area points where they could improve, and I wanted to flag that as like a teaser into the overall meta. And I think I look forward to the creativity coming from future teams as well. So hopefully this makes sense to you guys, and hopefully this is the first of many analysis for this Worlds. So see you around.